get this nice little reapplicant check. And it will actually change the rest of your application. For reapplicants to Columbia Business School, you will submit a reapplicant essay. You can submit an optional essay, but you don't do the main essay questions over again. Remember how I said that Columbia cares about you talking to folks and doing your research? Well, here's your chance. So let's say that you absolutely have, and you can actually add who have you spoken to? Is it alumni, a current student, a CBS rep, or did you attend an event? And you'll put in the details there. Next, if you're open to be considered for the J-term program, you'll indicate that here. If you don't know what that is, you can follow this link. Essentially, the J-term program is for folks who are trying to stay broadly within their industry or up level. You go to school 4 months later and you graduate on time. Down here in miscellaneous information, it'll ask if you've ever been the subject of a disciplinary action at a prior academic institution, or have you been convicted of a crime? When I was in admissions, it wasn't super uncommon for someone to say yes. And if that is the case for you, you should take your time and take the opportunity to answer this question. Explain what happened, what your response was, and maybe your growth since then, but don't rush this. On to the next page. So a lot of this is quite common sense, right? This is your personal information, your name, your address, number, biographical information, gender identity, citizenship. Now, if you have multiple citizenships, you will place them here. Languages, I like to point that out. You'll put what your native language is, and then you'll add another language and your proficiency as well. Your geographical information. Where did you grow up? So sometimes folks move around and they've been a citizen of many countries, or they've gone to high school somewhere, but college another. Really fill this out as if, where did you spend the majority of your life from, say birth to age 18, and then you'll go on to select all the countries that you've lived, worked, or studied in for 12 months or more. What wraps this up is a photo. This is probably the most common question I get about the Columbia application. Why are they asking me for a picture? No one else does that. It's a really nice way to put a face to an application. Admissions looks at it for maybe a second, but it really does humanize the application. Now, a lot of folks will ask me, Kelsey, what do I choose? Choose something you'd feel comfortable showing your mother. So please no cool bikini pictures on the beach. And really, it is a small chance for you to show personality. So if you have a dog, a partner, if you have a really cool hobby, that might be a really nice picture. Now, I'm not suggesting you go out and adopt a dog or pick up a crazy hobby just to have a cool picture. Again, admissions looks at it for just a second, but I do recommend that everyone fills this out. On to the next page here. So this is family information. Why would Columbia be interested in this? Some applicants have really interesting or different family backgrounds. And even if it's a traditional family background, they're still interested in knowing that. So when you go to add a parent or guardian, now it's important. Some folks are not in contact with their family. Maybe unfortunately their parents are deceased, but you can still fill this out. They're interested in what is their background? What is their highest degree obtained? What are they working? Are they retired? Because sometimes it just gives a glimpse into where is this person coming from? What factors might make them themselves? If you're a first-generation college student, the first in your family to complete a 4-year degree, they'd like to know that. This next one, spouse, partner, or significant other information. Why would Columbia or other schools like to know this? If you're coming to business school with a family or a partner, they want to welcome them just as much as they welcome you. If you're admitted and they know that you are, for example, married, your partner gets a really nice email folding them into the community, which is absolutely fabulous. If you have any relatives who have either attended or about to attend, they also want to capture that information here. For those of you who might be joining and you're also going to have a partner apply at the same time, you should fill this in. So let's say, yes, they'll ask for their name, your relationship, and what school. So this is for the university, not just for the business school, but you should fill this in. Why might they be interested? If you have a partner and you have dreams of attending Columbia University together, they want to keep couples together because if you're happy and they're happy, you're going to be a better student. And so fill this out, and that's why they capture it. Thinking. Okay. Employment information. There's a couple things here that I'll call tips and tricks, but I think are really important. This section is chock full of information. First, they want to know where you're coming from to really inform your essays, your resume, your letters of recommendation. They will ask you about salary information. And as someone who used to run Rivera is the process by which admitted students will be asked to confirm the information they've put in the application, including their employment information. Did you work where you say you worked? Were you paid what you said you were paid? When you go to add an employer, you'll add in all this information, your start dates, the employment order. When you put in, say, full-time work, then they'll ask you about your salary. Please do not estimate any of this information. You can use tax returns, a pay stub, your offer letter. So you'll put in your starting and ending salary, a starting and ending bonus. Do not estimate. If you have a non-guaranteed bonus, do not put it in here. I have seen many a person, especially when I was admissions, get caught by this. Sometimes people say, oh, I make $500,000, but it's, ESOPs. That doesn't count. So do not estimate here. I cannot stress that enough. Down here, it'll ask you for your duties and responsibilities at every role. Please don't just copy and paste your resume. That will come across as lazy. Instead, your resume, and we'll get there, should be impact statements. How have you had an outsized impact on your team or organization? Those are impact statements, wherein this is what are you doing? Don't use jargon. Write very plainly. How many things are you over? What is the main focus of your job? Let's get out of that. So down here, they'll ask you to enter the total numbers of months of full-time post-undergraduate work experience you will have upon enrolling. You'll see a lot of stats and figures of every single MBA program. This is the average years of work experience. This is really how they capture that. There's a whole data calculator. They're saying, hey, this is really important, and here's a tool. So enter in those months. You'll say whether you're a current employee. You'll provide an explanation for any gaps of 3 months or longer. You'll see in a lot of these MBA applications, sometimes it's 2 months, sometimes it's 4. Columbia is 3 months or longer. If you have any plans of working for your family business, you'll put that in here. Now, sometimes folks do or are orbiting a family business, but that's not their plan A or plan B, but maybe it's a plan C for you, knowing that you have a fallback. So if there's a family business, if you've either worked for it before, maybe it's a plan C, you can put that in there. Resume. So they say, put a CV of 1 to 2 pages. You really should try, endeavor, aim for 1 page. I have worked with folks with 15 years of experience. I'm a bit of a magician. I can get anything down to 1 page. It's really uncommon to see 2 pages. So please, that's my advice to you. Please endeavor to do 1 page and you'll upload it here. They say a Word or a PDF document. My advice, always choose PDF because it preserves the formatting. And then last but not least, if you have served before or are serving, you'll enter that information here and they'll capture what education military benefits you qualify for. You'll put that in here. Education background. So a couple things. Yes, this is straightforward, but I find that there's a couple common questions that I get. Kelsey, I don't have a traditional GPA scale, or I'm from an international program. When I was in admissions, India was one of my territories. So admissions is very used to reading transcripts from international programs. You'll put your institution in here. You'll fill in this details as the best of your ability, right? Major, they don't capture absolutely everything. And so you will choose what is the best fit for your major, if you had a second major or a minor. If you come from an institution like Brown that doesn't calculate a GPA, you'll select this here and that will actually take away that information. Otherwise, you will put your GPA as well as your GPA scale here. You'll select the language it's conducted in and put your awards. You will also submit your transcript here. Columbia is one of the schools that they're fine having an unofficial transcript copy. If you have not already requested that from your institutions, do that now. end this call after we finish speaking, go request that. You need to have that, and you don't want that to be the reason why your application is delayed or you can't submit on time. Moving on, you'll put in some professional credentials, for example, a CFA or a CPA. And if you've ever had an education interruption, I love that phrasing. If you say yes, you'll be able to enter that information in the optional supplement statement on the essay page. So that's the optional essay. Extracurricular. So there's a little bit of a change this year. We'll start with the one that hasn't changed. So Columbia's interested in 3 collegiate extracurricular activities and 3 post-collegiate extracurricular activities in their order of importance. All schools are interested to see how have you balanced your time while you were in school? Because if you were able to do that in the past, you're probably going to do that in a really nice and interesting way once you are admitted. Now, you'll be limited in what you choose. Choose the things that are the most impactful to you. So you'll enter in, very basic information, your dates of participation, hours per week, weeks per year, and your description. I believe that folks should be putting extracurriculars in their resume, but again, similar to what I said with duties and responsibilities for your job, you shouldn't copy and paste. This text box gives you the ability to give a little bit more detail. Why were you proud of this? Who did you impact? The change this year comes with this little box, which honestly, I'm a little bummed by. So last year, there was no character limit. And I loved being able to craft really interesting lists here. The difference here is that it's asking about activities or passions. I read that as hobbies, whereas an extracurricular activity is really something that you're a part of a team, a bigger mission, a bigger org. But an activity or passion could be something like rollerblading or oil painting. So you only have 100 characters here. Make it sparkly, make it as interesting as possible. With essays, I'm going to give a high level overview. I would love for you tuning in here to join me on August 12th, where I'll do a really in-depth essay walkthrough. So for that reason, I will do a high level. There hasn't been too many changes. For the short answers, they are 50 characters long, and there's 2 of them. What is your immediate post-MBA professional goal with a maximum of 50 characters? This is less than a tweet. You want to get specific but brief. So just as an example, I put in tech investment banking at a firm like Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley. They don't expect this to be grammatically correct. In fact, when I was in admissions, this is one of the first things that I looked at, and I just wanted to get a sense to prime me to read someone's resume, to read their LORs, and to read their goals essay. The second one is, how will you spend the summer after the first year of your MBA? So this is traditionally an internship, but if you're at a family business or you're formulating your own startup, you will enter that in here, and it'll be just as short, but just as detailed and succinct. Coming up here are your essays. Essay 1 has not changed. We love that. What are your career goals over the next 3 to 5 years, and what is your long-term dream job? Maximum of 50 words. Here's a tip. Anytime you see a file upload, as opposed to a text box up here, you have a tiny bit of flexibility in meeting word count. Now, you should be able to answer this question in 500 words, but if it's 510 words, 515 words, you won't be penalized. Please do not submit 550 or 600 words. Essay number 2 is a difference this year. I'm not surprised. What we're seeing over the last couple of months is as schools roll out their essay questions, they want to stay away from anything that could be perceived as diversity, equity, or inclusion, unfortunately. Therefore, Columbia has slimmed down this essay question from last year, which really focused on its PPIL curriculum. Today, it is share a specific example of how you've made a team more collaborative, inclusive, or fostered a greater sense of community within an organization in 250 words. Classic situation, action, result. And you want to make sure that you're choosing something where you've made an impact. Essay 3 has not changed. I think it's a great essay. This is really its why Columbia essay. How will you co-create your optimal MBA experience at Columbia? Please be specific. I love that they've included that in there. They are pointing you towards across academics, across cultural things, across professional resources. How are you going to be here? One way I like to look at this is essay 1 is very future focused on your career, whereas essay 3 is how are you going to be a fabulous student here? What are you interested in? How are you going to bring your sparkly self to campus? And so this one should touch upon academics, cultural, and professional. How I like to look at cultural is they've got an enormous amount of fun clubs. Are you going to be a part of the Arts and Society Club? Are you going to be a member of Follies? Are you going to be a part of Hermes? Really imagine yourself being at Columbia and contributing to it in this essay. Bringing up the rear, there's an optional essay like most programs, but Columbia is pretty luxurious. It gives you 500 words to answer anything that might be perceived as a blemish. Therefore, utilize this. It can be in bullet point form. You can use very short sentences. It's very rare that I think any applicant needs to use 500 words. So please don't feel like, oh, I've got 500, I must utilize it. That's not the case. It can be even a sentence or two. Moving on to test scores. I've got a lot to say about this. So test scores, every school can be different. Columbia is one of the schools that are okay accepting unofficial scores. Please check every individual schools that you're applying to, what their policies are. Here, you will add every test that you've taken or every test that you want them to consider. Here's my tip though. Every time you retake a test, you're demonstrating that you work hard, that you don't give up. And that's a very tangible piece of evidence to demonstrate what kind of student you might be. And so Columbia is asking you to input any sort of test, what your test state was. Let's put that in here. And then on the next page, it'll ask you to actually upload screenshots of those unofficial reports. Now, many of you have probably already taken a test. You know that this test will say, hey, for free, you can send your scores, your official scores to the test, to the individual school, and you can do that here. Now, they have a lot of information here that the score needs to be valid when you are actually enrolling. If you have scores that will expire close to the application deadline, you should really send them in really quickly. If you have scores that will expire within the next 6 months, send them in as soon as possible. So for those of you who might be running up against an expiration, mind this. And on the next page, you're able to provide your current name, if that's different than what your name is today, how many times you've taken it. And then here's where you enter in your recommendation. So ideally, you're choosing folks who will celebrate you, who are recent, and ideally it's a current manager. However, about 30% of folks who apply to business school cannot ask a current manager, and that's okay. Admissions is human. They know that that is the case for some folks. And so if you cannot ask a current manager because you will risk your job, you will risk a promotion, responsibilities, or even a bonus, don't do that. You can explain it in the optional essay. Instead, choose folks who are maybe recent, maybe they've left the company, et cetera, and you'll enter your recommendation in here. So your first name, your last name, organization, their email. Know this, as soon as you put their email address in and hit send a recommender, they automatically get a link. So make sure that they're prepared to write on your behalf. Down here, it's a common question. Should I waive my right? You should. 99% of folks waive the right. What this essentially means is that you will not come to campus and then go back to admissions and say, hey, I'm really curious about what my recommender wrote about me. It's very atypical. Sure, it's within your right, but I really believe that folks should be waiving the right. If you do not waive your right, they'll sort of look at that and say, hey, what's that about? You won't be penalized for it, but again, I think you should waive your right. Financing your MBA. So not every program has this. Johnson sort of has a similar question, but Columbia's is pretty robust. They say attending business school is a major investment. Yes, it absolutely is. It's very expensive. They're saying the estimated cost for the first year is 138, which is a slight increase from last year. That's unfortunate, but it is the case. And so they're signaling to you that we want folks to think ahead. We want you to start planning. And so they'll ask, do you intend to apply for need-based institutional funding? Columbia does have both need-based aid and merit scholarships. If you say, yes, this is a little FYI, this is a little bit different they've done in the last couple of years. If you are invited to interview, you will be given an email asking to complete your CSS profile and the CBS scholarship application. In that, they'll be asking for proof of income. What they do is they pull all this, and for the folks that have been admitted, they're going to see what the average income level is, your asset level, and be able to determine who is the neediest. Aside from that, they'll ask whether or not you're going to utilize student loans. And if you say yes, you'll estimate the amount of student loans that you're going to borrow. And you'll answer this question assuming that you get nothing, right? They just want to see you think ahead. Then they'll ask about how much you will self-contribute or if your family is going to contribute. Ask about employer or company sponsorship. You will not be penalized for this. It's pretty rare that somebody pursuing a 2-year degree will be sponsored unless you're a consultant. But if you are so fortunate of that, you'll fill out this information, who the representative is that they can contact. They'll ask whether you've secured any external scholarships or fellowship, and if you say yes, you'll fill all that out. And whether or not you have any other funding agency. Certain countries will fully pay for your MBA in the event you're admitted to a program on their list. As you fill this out, this number will shrink. Let's see. For example, let's say that you're going to give yourself $10,000, and you'll see that this number down here shrinks. This number must add up to 0 in order for you to proceed. So again, it's giving a layout of you thinking ahead. How might you finance this? If you have any other questions on this, they've got a whole website for it, and you can always reach out to the admissions committee, but hopefully this is pretty straightforward. The honor code. So last year, this was really at the top of it. They wanted you filling out the rest of the application with this in mind. Allow me to do that for you. This is quite serious, right? Every school will have this thing. Offers of admission will be rescinded should any misrepresentation and or omission occur. While this is exceedingly rare, they want folks to be thinking about this. And so if you misrepresent, for example, your GPA, a test score, how much you've earned, even your role in an organization, they reserve the right to receive those reports and rescind your application offer of admission. And so read this through carefully, of course. I fully expect everyone on this call will adhere to the principles of truth, integrity, and respect. However, read this through carefully. You'll acknowledge, you will certify, agree, and place your signature within. And that wraps up the application. It is a little bit daunting, but I think my advice for folks is that many of you are probably applying to many programs, which is really exciting. Fill out one application and then go on to the rest, because I think that muscle of filling out this information, uploading your resume, so on and so forth, it becomes a little bit of a muscle and becomes easier as you go through. I hope this has been helpful. I see the chat box. It is voluminous, and so I would love to begin to answer some questions. I'll come back on camera.
Okay, so I'll help you navigate through the questions, Kelsey. The first question that I can see is, hi, Kelsey, I've heard that it's quite important for those working in finance to apply in the first round. How important would you say this is? What kind of factors do you think would make it more beneficial to apply in the second round? For example, an upcoming work secondment in different country, a promotion that you expect soon, etc.
Everyone should apply when they are ready. There's no sense in rushing an application for round 1. There's no sense in even rushing an application for round 2. You should apply when you are good and ready. Now, is there a difference between round 1 and round 2? It's a very slight one, but not enough for me to say, hey, you really need to be in round 1, right? There are many folks who apply in round 2 and get in, even my clients. Now, the beauty in round 1 is that they haven't accepted anyone yet, right? They're really beginning to shape the foundation of the class. They have no one admitted. In round 2, they will have really filled up more than half the class. And by then they'll actually even have a wait list. So by round 2, they have a little bit of sense of their buckets already. And while there's no quotas, they don't want an entire class full of finance or management consulting or oil and gas. And so then they might have to be a little bit pickier, But again, it is not so picky or the stats are not meaningful enough for me to say you must do round one or you must do round two. So, and that really goes for any industry. It's not finance should apply in round one or real estate should apply in round two. It's nothing like that. You really should apply in the round that makes the most sense for you and your life.
Perfect. All right, the next question is by Manav, and he asks, can you rank most important thing in application rank wise? If you have
Yeah.
billion-dollar company boards of director recommendation, will it make your application strong? And work experience is really important if you don't have.
There is no ranking any of this, right? GMAT score, work experience, your goal, like any of it, test scores, there is no ranking. It really is an art and a science when we sit down. In fact, when I was reading, when I was in the admissions committee, we had full carte blanche to read in any order that we wanted to. I prefer to do a resume first to see how you speak about yourself, LORs to see how other people talk about you. And then I read the essays. And then I created my synthesis on your strengths and weaknesses and whether or not I suggested that you move forward in an interview. There is no ranking. It really is a puzzle. And I know that that's not probably the answer that person was hoping that I would say, but it's really an art and not so much a science.
Awesome. The next question is by Faisal, and he asks, if you get rejected by the upcoming J terms starting in January 2026, can you apply for the August 2026 starting term?
Theoretically, you can. You are only allowed to have one active application at a time. So that's Columbia full-time, Columbia J-term, Columbia executive program. However, if you're rejected for the J-term, you might want to do some reflection. What were the gaps? Was it a test score, your work experience? Were you not a really good fit for the J-term program? You have to self-reflect. Admissions will not, they are way too busy to give you feedback. And so you might want to see what might have been the gaps. You might even want to reach out to someone like me for a little bit of advice on that. And can you mitigate that gap in time for, say, a round one or a round two application this year? So, yes, it's theoretically possible, but two, really, my advice is to see whether or not you're able to mitigate any potential gaps to make it for this round.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. The question says, can MBA students at Columbia take classes from other schools, for example, Columbia Climate School?
Absolutely. And they even say that on their website. And the climate school is really cool, as are the 20 plus programs that they have. It's called cross registering. And I actually used to tout that when I gave information sessions around the world. You absolutely can. I believe it's two classes during the duration. And so you absolutely can. It's something that I find was really thoughtful when folks actually said it in their application, because it might be that you're looking into real estate transactions and a class from the law school might really pad your toolkit in a really unique way. And so, yes, absolutely. Fabulous thing to put in your goals essay.
Awesome. Okay, the next question is by Karanjot, and he asks, as an AI startup founder, how do my admission chances compared to corporate candidates with similar profiles? Does entrepreneurial experience generally help or hurt at Columbia MBA programs? And what should I emphasize in my application?
Ah, so having entrepreneurial experience, even currently or in the past, can be a strength, right? As a founder, you have a little bit of a different toolkit than, say, someone who is like very, very, very corporate. It doesn't help or hurt. It kind of depends on that experience. A question I'm actually going to add on to that is, what if my startup failed? Does that work against me? It absolutely doesn't. Failing well is actually a skill set that will behoove you throughout your life. What should I mention or what should I enhance? I mean, it's no different than anyone else, right? Your resume needs to be quite clear on the impact. So, how have you grown it? Have you had any funding? Have you expanded? Do you have any customers? That's not totally different than what I would tell a very traditional corporate client. But in fact, your entrepreneurial experience can enhance you in several ways. And the onus is really on you to paint that picture for admissions.
Perfect. The next question is by Soham, and he asks, how well put or charted out should be the current experience to short-term or long-term goal? For example, I currently do credit research at one of the top banks and want to go into impact investing, development, finance.
Okay. I'll speak at a broad level and then I'll talk about that particular thing. In the admissions world, and even working with clients now for 10 years, there are kind of three types of people. One who wants to accelerate in their current industry or function. Two, someone who wants to keep their function but change industries. and the other person who wants to keep their industry but change functions. When you have folks who want to change both their industry and function, that can come across as a little more risky. And that is something that admissions keeps in mind. They are risk analysts. How likely is it that this person will achieve their goals and be employed? When you have something like impact investing post MBA, there's not many roles. And those roles are primarily going to folks who have been in that industry before, have banking, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you're changing both role and function, you need to know that that is a risk. That admissions can look at that and say, I'm not certain that that's going to work out, and you could be rejected on that merit. And so keep that in mind. But broadly, I think being able to draw a very clear path between, hey, I have some experience here. This is the link or the thread towards what I'll do in the future, but you must be ultra crisp. If you're still doing impact investing, you have to be able to name particular companies that you would be happy to work for and what you would be doing there. Are you going to be in the operations function? Are you going to be an investor? You have to paint a very crystal clear picture so that the reader, whether or not they have experience directly in that industry or not, understands.
Awesome. Okay, I'll take the next question by Priyam. And the question says, I currently have 5 years of work experience as a data business or product analytics in startups in multiple geographies, India, Middle East, and now I'm moving to Europe for a new job. Do you think I should wait for a year and get the experience in Europe and then apply for my MBA for fall 27, or should I target fall 26? Will it help and make a difference? Also, can this multi-geography give me an edge over other candidates?
It's such a deeply personal question. I don't feel comfortable saying yes, you should wait or no, you shouldn't wait. You really should apply when you're comfortable and you're ready and you feel like you've got a good foundation to build off of. It might be that that European experience will give you an edge, give you something else that maybe either it'll help you achieve your post MBA goals or you'll bring something to the campus community. There is an expectation, a lot of students, that you're not just going to take, but you're going to give in some way. And so that experience could give you that. But I really can't say, and I won't say whether or not you should wait. Folks who have multiple geographies, can that be an enhancement? It can, but it's not held against somebody, right? Some folks have always worked and lived in the same country, but their experience and their impact can be just as great as somebody who works across geographies. However, it can be an enhancer for you if you're able to dig into that.
Awesome, thank you. Moving on to the next question is by Andy, and he or she asks, will not having a lot of CBS alumni or representatives that you talked to meaningfully impact on the application?
Well, it can, meaning Columbia and many, many schools care about what they call yield. How many students have they given an offer of acceptance to, and how many people have accepted them? They put, and they're signaling to you in the application, we care about this. If you submit an application and you haven't attended any events, and you haven't talked to any alums, and you haven't talked to any students, how likely do you think they're thinking it is that you're going to accept their offer of admission? Is it held against you? No, but it's really indicative of your excitement about the school. In the very first page, they're saying, come to an event, talk to our students. And if you're ignoring that, they're just going to assume that you're not interested. So it actually can work against you that you're not putting in the effort because there are thousands of people attending events. There are thousands of people utilizing the resources that they're screaming at you, please use these. Can work against you.
Perfect. Okay. The next is a long question. The question is, I would like to inquire about the appropriate section to indicate that I have successfully passed the CFA level 2 exam. I noticed that the application specifically references CFA charter holders, but does not appear to provide an option for candidates who have cleared level 2. Also, can you give me advice for 10 plus years of experience?
You should be able to put what levels you've got. It's also a really fine place to put it in your resume, right? I've cleared X levels. Some people I pass it on the first attempt, but you can put that color in both places. Folks with 10 years of experience, there is an extra onus on you to explain why the full-time program versus something like a part-time program or an EMBA. For some folks, that is because they're making a major transition, and the J-term program nor the EMBA program is really the right place for that. Secondarily, there's an increased onus on folks who have more years of work experience to enhance the experience of their classmates. If you're coming in with X years of experience, might you contribute in a unique way to a conference, to a club, to one of these, for example, like the small business consulting program that they have? However, you need to be very clear about what you're utilizing the MBA for. A lot of folks will ask, I have X years, does that work against me? And the answer is always, it completely depends on the person. Every year, they will accept somebody who has 1 year of work experience. I've even seen zero, although that is exceedingly rare. But I remember admitting someone with 20 years of work experience into the full-time program. Their story made sense, but there is that extra onus on you to explain what you're going to contribute and why the program, given your stage professionally.
All right. The next question is my direct if my direct supervisor at work has the same designation as me on paper, since my firm has a very horizontal structure, will this be an issue if I pick them as my recommender?
Ah, it can if you don't explain it, but it's very easily done, right? In your optional, I'll say, hey, I've chosen X person. They are my direct manager, just to make that extra clear. And they can also say it in their letter, right? Hi, I'm X. I am Y's direct supervisor. Just make it very clear for them.
Perfect. Okay. I think the previous question also answered the next question, which is, does having a 11 years work experience go against the candidature? I'm looking for an MBA to pivot to more leadership roles in supply chain retail industry, where I currently work as a in-house consultant.
Same answer.
Yeah,
Really,
that's
the onus is on you. It
all right.
doesn't necessarily work against you, but you've got that extra thing that you need to worry about in essays.
Uh-huh. All right. The next question is, I completed a college diploma and then began working full-time at a prestigious global firm. While working, I finished my undergrad degree part-time. I have now been with the same firm for over 5 years and have received 3 promotions. I completed my undergrad this year. For my MBA applications, how should I calculate my years of work experience? Should I only count the years after I completed my undergraduate degree?
Yes. In fact, the application says that only include the number of months post undergraduate degree. If you feel like that's not fully representative of what you can bring to the program, you can utilize an optional essay or really that goals essay and the resume to showcase your full experience.
All right. The next question is, can you upload the scanned official transcript or does it have to be web friendly?
They're going to ask for something like a PDF, and so you'll just upload that document.
All right. Um, all right. The next question is, can you share some information regarding EA score, maybe a range or average?
I can't. I'm formerly admissions committee, and so I can only talk about it, from my experience now working with clients. Columbia implemented the executive assessment as a third option, not the GMAT, not the GRE. Really, from my vantage point, I'm not in a Columbia Business School official anymore, but working with my clients, really, the floor seems to be a score of a 155. Now, are there edge cases? Of course there are, but if you're not hitting that 155, it's not a competitive score. I have seen scores as high as 164, 167. A really good score, in my opinion, is anything north of 160.
Awesome. Next question is, what is the AI policy regarding essays?
Columbia doesn't seem to have one this year. I fully expect that following schools like Yale or like Ross or like Harvard, they're going to have one. But right now, it just seems like they're not putting anything in here to attest that you are or you aren't. But I'm going to expect that in the coming. I mean, they could even change it mid round.
All right. The next question is, if you have recently left a big job to help with family business, who do you put as a recommender?
Ooh, well, it depends on how long ago you left your job, right? You should be picking folks who are, like I said before, like able to comment on your growth over time. It might be you're too new to the family business and nobody can really do that thing. And so going back to that firm you were previously at, you might choose somebody from that time. You could even an optional essay say like, hey, I'm really new to the family business. I can't ask my dad, nor should you ask your dad. And so you can just comment on that X person from your previous company is best suited to speak about your accomplishments.
All right. Um, I think just the last question that we'd be able to take. So, um, I'll just scan through.
Yep.
Yeah,
Pick
okay.
a couple.
How, 1 minute ago. How much importance does GPA and job profile carry? Asking because I have a low GPA in my undergrad and come from a non-conventional background, TV journalist.
I'm going to tease that apart. I mean, stats are important, right? These schools get thousands of applicants, and a way to really understand someone's academic readiness or their ability to achieve are those hard stats, fortunately or unfortunately. If you're coming in with a low GPA, there's a couple steps that you can take. Could you retake or take a community college or an online course? You absolutely could to demonstrate more recent academic readiness. Also, make sure that your test score is representative of that thing. If you have a double blemish, your low GPA and low test score, you need to know that that might make a school like CBS not only a super reach, but maybe an out of reach. And so you need to come to it when you are ready. If applying in the following round would allow you to mitigate that test score, you absolutely should. The other question about like unconventional background, it's neither a good thing or a bad thing. It just sort of is. And when I was in admissions and even working with clients now, having a non-traditional background can be really cool. You might have an additional toolkit that others don't, and it might be a really interesting way for you to contribute in the classroom. Make sure to dig into those things.
Perfect. I think that's our time. Thank you everyone for joining the Columbia Business School session at the application walkthrough. And a big thank you to you, Kelsey, for your valuable insights and for your guidance. We hope that this session helps you feel more confident as you prepare your application. All the best to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Thank you, Kelsey, once again. And thank
Thank
you
you, Sejal.
everyone for being a part.
Best of luck in your applications.
Thank you. Bye bye.